There were 13 toothbrushes in the bathroom. I counted them twice. I wasn't supposed to be in that lodge. Wasn't invited, wasn't announced, definitely wasn't welcome. I stood there, staring at the sink like it was a crime scene, toothbrushes all jammed into a chipped ceramic cup that read "Smile More." 1 electric, 12 manual. No names. Just colors and dried toothpaste trails. She told me it was going to be a small offsite with just the core marketing team. Her words. I remember because she said them while packing a swimsuit I'd never seen before and a bottle of perfume she swore gave her headaches. We're just going to do some group exercises, trust falls, that kind of thing, she said. But the only thing that fell that weekend was my belief that I mattered to her at all. I hadn't even meant to go. Not really. I wasn't planning a grand gesture or a jealous scene. I just couldn't sleep. I hadn't slept well in weeks, not since she started getting texts late at night that made her smile and then flip her phone screen down. So I drove. No plan. Just headlights, cold coffee, and this terrible feeling in my gut that the woman I loved was laughing somewhere I wasn't. The parking lot was full. That was my first clue. 12 cars. I counted those two. None of them were rental SUVs or company cars. They were personal vehicles, some with dog hair in the back seat or kids' drawings clipped to the dash. People had brought pieces of their lives here. That didn't feel like just a team-building trip. I slipped in through the laundry room door because the front was too loud. There was music playing, something synthy and expensive sounding, and people laughing in that loose, reckless way they do when no one's watching. Only someone was watching now. Me. The toothbrushes rattled slightly when I opened the bathroom drawer. That's when I saw the wine glasses. 3 of them. Lipstick on 2. 1 still wet. I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't snooping, I swear. I wasn't even mad, not yet. I was frozen. Like I'd walked into a scene that didn't know it had an audience. Voices drifted in from down the hall. Hers was one of them. Lower than usual. Playful. Drunk? I didn't go toward it. Not yet. I walked down the opposite hallway, past rooms with half-closed doors. I saw a man I didn't recognize passed out on a velvet beanbag, wearing nothing but a t-shirt. A woman laughed softly from behind a door that was definitely not soundproof. And then I saw it. Her heels. The black ones with red soles that she claimed pinched her toes too much to wear. They were outside room 6. Beside them, a pair of men's sneakers. Large. Untied. Familiar. My mouth went dry. I don't know how long I stood there. Might have been seconds. Might have been 10 minutes. I just stared at those shoes like they were spelling out a message I couldn't read. The door creaked open before I even touched it. And what I saw next? It didn't look like betrayal. It looked like routine. Like I was the intruder in a life that had already moved on without me. I'll continue in part 2. But I need to sit with this for a bit. Because once I describe what happened inside that room, I don't think I'll ever unsee it. The door didn't have a lock. It didn't even pretend to. Just a small brass knob that turned with a feather's worth of effort, like it was always meant to be opened. That part still gets me. It wasn't hidden. Wasn't secret. It was wide open to anyone who wandered close enough, like me. I didn't burst in. I didn't storm, shout, or make a sound. I didn't have the guts. I just stood there, holding the frame with one hand like I might fall over, watching the scene inside like it was a movie that hadn't been made for me. Bryn was there. And so was the man with the untied sneakers, Mason, her project director. I recognized him from the holiday party 2 years ago. He had made a speech about disrupting digital silos, and I'd made a joke about it in the car ride home. She didn't laugh then. Now I watched her laugh with him, curled up beside him like they belonged to the same sentence. There was a bottle of wine between them, the good kind, the one we kept in the back of our cupboard for anniversaries. The label was peeled halfway off, her nervous tick. She was wearing one of those oversized company-branded hoodies, the same one she said she forgot at the office months ago. They weren't doing anything that would break a YouTube rule, but they were doing enough to break me. I could have walked away right then. I could have left and pretended I never saw it. That's what the old me would have done, swallowed it whole, convinced myself I misread the moment, convinced myself I was paranoid or insecure or clingy. That's what I've done for years. But not this time. I stepped inside the room. The moment my foot touched the carpet, Bryn turned her head. And I wish I could tell you she looked guilty. But she didn't. She just looked, interrupted. Like I had walked into a brainstorming session or a casual Zoom call. Her expression didn't twist into panic or shame. It just paused. That's what it felt like. A pause. Lyle, she said, like my name tasted foreign. Mason's face didn't even twitch. He looked at me, blinked once, and then casually leaned back, propping his feet up on the footboard like I wasn't even there. Like I wasn't the husband. Like I was a valet or a misplaced intern who wandered in from another department. I couldn't sleep. I mumbled. I don't know why I said that. It was the truth, but also the dumbest possible thing to lead with. So I drove. Bryn stood up. Not in a hurry, not flustered. Just slow and steady, like she was figuring out how to word a press release. Lyle, this isn't what it looks like. I almost laughed. I genuinely almost let out this bitter, cracked laugh, because I wanted to ask her, then what is it? A leadership seminar in bed? A late-night PowerPoint cuddle? But I didn't say anything. She came closer, touched my arm like it still belonged to her. You should have called first, she whispered. That's when something inside me snapped, not violently, but with the quiet finality of a door being locked from the inside. She wasn't sorry. She was inconvenienced. I took a deep breath. The kind you take when you realize you're standing on a trapdoor that's already been opened. And then I turned around and left. I didn't slam the door. I didn't make a scene. I just walked down the hallway, past the toothbrushes, past the guy snoring on the beanbag, past the music and the fake laughter. Back to my car. Back to the life I thought was real. But it wasn't over yet. The next morning, I got a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. It's not what you think. Except by then, I wasn't thinking anymore. I was done pretending this was salvageable. And what happened later that day, what I discovered about who else knew, that's what really tore the ground out from under me. I didn't go home right away. I couldn't. I pulled into a gas station 2 towns over, parked behind the dumpster like a coward, and just sat there with the engine off and my forehead pressed to the steering wheel. I couldn't cry. Not yet. My body wouldn't let me. It was like my brain hadn't caught up to what my eyes had seen. Or maybe it had, and it just didn't know how to react. Either way, I sat there listening to the faint hum of the ice machine and the muffled radio of someone's pickup truck and tried to remember who I was before I drove up that mountain road. I must have been there over an hour. I remember watching an employee come out to smoke a cigarette, then go back in, then come back out for another. The same guy, over and over. At one point, he looked at me through the darkness and gave a slight nod like he knew. I didn't nod back. When I finally turned my phone back on, it lit up with 5 messages, 3 from Bryn, 2 from that number I didn't recognize. The ones from Bryn were dry, almost clinical. Lyle, this isn't fair. I'm sorry you saw things that way. Please don't do anything dramatic. Things that way. Like I'd misunderstood. Like it was my fault for arriving without knocking loud enough. I didn't answer, but I opened the other 2 texts. They were from a number labeled Camden T. I didn't recognize the name, but the first message made my heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with confusion. I told her to come clean, man. You didn't deserve that. I blinked. Read it again. The second message followed a minute later. If you want the full story, I'll give it to you. But not over text. I'm at Rook's Coffee in Hilford till 2. Do what you want. I stared at those words like they were a trap. Who was Camden? Why did he know? And why would he be waiting in a public place like some kind of neutral witness to my disaster? I should have gone home. I should have driven back, locked the door, fed the dog, and acted like the world hadn't twisted itself sideways. But curiosity, or maybe desperation, pulled me toward Hilford. I told myself it was just a detour, just a chance to feel less crazy. But deep down, I think I knew. The truth was waiting for me in that coffee shop. It was a tiny place, wedged between a barbershop and a dusty old bookstore. The bell over the door jingled like something out of a movie. Camden was already sitting by the window with 2 mugs of coffee, one untouched. He looked up as I walked in and nodded once like we were old friends. We weren't. He was younger than me. Early 30s maybe. Neatly trimmed beard. Wore a denim jacket like it meant something. And he looked tired, not physically, but spiritually, like he'd been carrying someone else's lies for too long and just wanted to let them go. You're Lyle, he said, standing up briefly before sitting again. You're Camden, I replied, like I wasn't entirely sure. He motioned for me to sit. I did. We stared at each other for a moment, the kind where the silence stretches out too long to be comfortable. Then he said it. I used to date Bryn, long before you 2 got married. But I stayed in touch, not by choice. She kept the thread going. And then a few months ago, she reached out again. I didn't interrupt. I barely breathed. She said she missed the way things used to feel. That she was tired of living in a beige box with a man who double-checked the locks too much. That's what she said, Lyle. Her exact words. I swallowed. I had no words to give back. I didn't bite. I told her I was engaged now, that I was done with whatever that version of her was. But she didn't stop there. She kept circling, commenting on posts, sending old photos, even asking if I'd heard from Mason recently. Mason. That name landed like ice down my spine. That's when I realized she wasn't just bored. She was shopping, looking for someone to make her feel untouchable again. And Mason? He was dumb enough to bite. I warned him, too. He didn't care. Said she was different now. I stared down into my coffee, which had gone cold. Last week, Camden continued, she told me she was going on a team-building trip and said she might not come back the same. I didn't know what she meant until you showed up last night. Someone texted me that you'd walked in, that you saw everything. I looked up. Who? He hesitated. The girl who gave you directions. Her name's Elise. She works reception. She used to be close with Bryn, until Bryn slept with her boyfriend last spring. I blinked, and that's when I decided I was done keeping quiet. You weren't supposed to see it, Lyle, but you had to see it. I leaned back in my seat. My throat felt tight. My hands had gone numb. Camden stood up. I don't want anything from you. I just wanted you to know you're not crazy. You were never crazy. He left before I could say thank you. Before I could say anything at all. I sat in that coffee shop for another hour, alone with the cold mug and the realization that Bryn's betrayal wasn't a single moment. It was a pattern, one I'd been too blind or maybe too hopeful to see. But what came later that night, after I finally got home, was worse than everything Camden told me. Because waiting for me on the doorstep wasn't Bryn. It was someone else entirely, and they were holding a folder with my name on it. The moment I pulled into the driveway, something felt off. Not just because my house looked the same when nothing else in my life did, but because of what was sitting there. Right on the welcome mat, square in the center, like it had been placed with ceremony. A folder. Thick, black, branded with no logo, no name, just a thin silver sticker on the bottom corner with the words confidential for Lyle Dennison. My first instinct? It was from Bryn. Some twisted apology, maybe a typed explanation, a list of reasons she'd scribbled together while sitting beside the man I used to call a colleague. But this wasn't her style. She'd rather talk circles around something until I didn't know what was real anymore. This was direct, which scared me more than anything. I picked it up slowly, almost expecting it to be booby-trapped, metaphorically or otherwise. Benny, our dog, padded to the door and wagged like I just returned from the grocery store, unaware his world had shifted because mine had collapsed. I let him out into the backyard and sat at the kitchen table, folder unopened, staring at it like it might speak first. When I finally flipped it open, the first thing I saw was a photograph. A grainy one. Surveillance style. It showed Bryn walking into a building I didn't recognize, arm in arm with Mason, 3 days before the retreat. Behind them? A third figure. Familiar, but I couldn't place him immediately. Underneath the photo was a typed note. No letterhead. No name. Just a single paragraph, centered. Mr. Dennison, I apologize for the abruptness of this. I believe you're unaware of the full extent of your wife's recent activities. Enclosed are files that may be painful to read, but necessary if you wish to understand what has been hidden from you. The information was not acquired illegally. I've been watching Bryn and Mason for 6 weeks, at the request of someone you may or may not remember. I suggest you start with document 3. I blinked. 6 weeks? Someone I may remember? What the hell was this? I flipped past the first 2 documents, bank statements with weird transfer patterns, and a blurry text log of messages I couldn't fully read. Then I hit document 3, and that's when the air left the room. It was a printed email chain, not from Bryn, from my boss, Everett Mills, sent to an internal HR address just 12 days ago. The subject line, concerning relationship between team member and external party, Dennison. In the email, Everett was reporting a possible conflict of interest. He said he'd received a call from someone closely connected to Ms. Bryn Halloway, my wife, who stated that sensitive client data from my department might have been accessed without authorization through my remote login. The email said it was likely due to shared devices in our household, but also noted the connection was made on a Saturday, while I was out, while Bryn was home alone. There were more emails, IT flags, access logs, mentions of Mason's last name, Fitzroy, in systems he had no clearance for. And then it hit me. They weren't just cheating on me. They were using me. My name, My credentials. My system access. My trust. Bryn and Mason had been stealing from the company I worked for and leaving the breadcrumb trail right to my doorstep. Like I was the mule in a con I didn't even know existed. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the last page, which was a printed photo of Bryn's laptop screen taken through a window, time-stamped, zoomed in, showing a file folder titled Alt Client for Merge, with 3 subfiles. All of them dated the same weekend I thought she was up at the retreat. This wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage. It was the collapse of everything. My job, my record, my security clearance. All of it could be shredded by what they'd done under my name. I leaned back in the chair. Benny barked once from the backyard like he could feel the tension crawling through the walls. I had 1,000 questions, but the one that repeated louder than the rest wasn't why they did it. It was who sent the folder. Because that wasn't Bryn. And it wasn't Camden. It was someone else. Someone who knew too much. Someone watching the watchers. That night, just after 11 p.m., my doorbell rang. I didn't answer, but the voice that came through the speaker chilled me in a way nothing else had. Lyle, we need to talk. It's about what Bryn and Mason really planned to do. I don't think you understand how deep this goes. That voice. I hadn't heard it in years. And it belonged to the one person Bryn hated more than anyone alive. Her sister. The doorbell echoed again. Then silence. Then a soft knock. The kind someone does when they want to seem calm but are barely holding it together. I stood behind the door without opening it, heart pounding so hard I thought it might shake the deadbolt loose. The voice came again, softer this time. Lyle, please. I'm not here to hurt you. I have something you need to see. And I swear to God, if you don't open this door right now, you're going to regret it more than you already regret everything else. That broke me. Not because it was threatening, but because it sounded like someone who knew regret. I opened the door, and there she was, Delilah, Bryn's older sister. I hadn't seen her in nearly 4 years. Last I heard, she'd moved to Portland after a nasty fallout with Bryn over some family inheritance mess that I was smart enough to stay out of. Bryn never spoke her name after that. Not once. I actually assumed Delilah had cut ties with the entire family, and to be honest, I never thought I'd see her again. She looked tired. Not in the physical sense, but like someone who had been dragging a truth uphill for too long. She was wearing a raincoat, despite the skies being clear, and held a cheap-looking flash drive in her left hand like it was radioactive. May I come in? I nodded. Wordlessly. I didn't trust my voice. Once inside, she sat down at the kitchen table like she knew the layout. She probably did. She used to visit every Christmas before the fallout. She placed the flash drive on the table, slid it across to me like it was a loaded weapon, and then said something I will never forget. She was going to let you take the fall. It was like the oxygen left the room all over again. Delilah explained everything. How a month ago, she got a call from an unknown number, from someone claiming to be a friend of Lyle's. She said she almost ignored it, but something about the voice made her listen. That caller told her that Bryn had been feeding information to Mason for months, manipulating Lyle's login access at work to steal confidential data, and had already drafted a fake confession email she planned to send to Lyle's employer in his name. The story would go like this. Lyle had cracked under pressure, breached policy, and would resign to avoid legal consequences. Meanwhile, Bryn would play the shocked wife, mourning the collapse of her marriage while walking away clean. And she would have gotten away with it, Delilah said, leaning in, if I didn't know her better. According to Delilah, this wasn't Bryn's first scheme. In college, she framed a roommate for plagiarism to secure an internship. In her first job, she manipulated her supervisor into signing off on a deal that redirected funds, all while making him believe it had been his mistake. Every time, she vanished right before the consequences landed. And every time, someone else got buried. But this time, Delilah said, she messed up. Because you're not just some temporary stepping stone. You're Lyle. You're predictable. You double-check locks. You alphabetize spices. And that makes you dangerous to someone like her. Because she knew you'd find out eventually. I just stared at her, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on my chest like someone had parked a truck on my ribs. Why are you helping me? I finally asked. Delilah looked at me with something that wasn't quite pity, but it wasn't sympathy either. It was older than both. Because I've been where you are. I believed her once too. She broke people for fun, Lyle. And you were the last one standing. I couldn't let her destroy you just to cover her tracks. She gestured to the flash drive. Everything's on there. Emails. Recorded calls. Even a screen capture of the confession draft she wrote in your name. You can take it to the company. You can save yourself. You just have to act before she does. I reached for the drive with trembling fingers. There's one more thing, Delilah said, her voice cracking slightly. Bryn and Mason were planning to disappear. Leave the country next month. There's a reservation in both their names. One-way tickets. I printed the itinerary. She handed me a crumpled page. There it was, 2 tickets to Lisbon. June 2nd. I stared at that paper like it was a death certificate. They were going to take your life, your job, your reputation, she whispered, and vanish without a trace. And the worst part? She probably would have texted you from the airport to say it wasn't working out. I don't know how long we sat there in silence. I didn't cry. Still couldn't. But something shifted inside me. A quiet, irreversible click. I'm going to stop her, I said. My own voice surprised me. But I'm going to do it the right way. Delilah nodded. Then don't wait. She's already moving. She always does. And she was right. Because at 2:14 a.m., while I sat copying files from the flash drive, Bryn texted me. Hey, I know you're upset. Can we talk tomorrow? Just you and me. But it wasn't just me anymore. Tomorrow was already too late. I didn't reply to her message. Not a word. I read it a dozen times, watched the 3 blinking dots appear and vanish again as she tried to follow it up, as if she were struggling to craft the perfect lie, and I left it all on read. Let her stew. Let her feel that digital silence I felt for months while she whispered in the dark with Mason and pretended our life was a thing she could step out of like a jacket. Instead of responding, I printed everything. All of it. The emails from her fake account, the confession draft she wrote in my name, the airport itinerary, the photos, the access logs. I printed the surveillance picture of her hand inside Mason's coat pocket while he unlocked the back door to the office we both weren't supposed to have access to. I printed her smirk. I printed the text message from Camden. Even the list of 13 toothbrushes, just for myself. A reminder. Then I got to work. That morning, still wearing yesterday's hoodie, still operating on nothing but spite and burnt coffee, I called HR. Not my supervisor. Not Everett. I went above him. I requested an in-person meeting with the compliance officer and the head of legal, told them I had evidence of a breach and impersonation, that I wouldn't speak of it over the phone. My voice cracked halfway through the call, but I held it steady long enough to get a time slot. Noon. That same day, before I left, I put the documents into a clear plastic folder. Not because I wanted to show off, but because I wanted every person I passed in the lobby to see that I wasn't bluffing, that I was walking into the fire with gasoline in hand. And here's the part one still can't believe I did. I sent a second folder, an identical one, directly to Bryn. Not by text. Not by email. I hand-delivered it. I drove to her office building, parked across the street, walked in during peak lunch hour. Her company had one of those sleek open floor plans where everyone pretends they're not eavesdropping, and I made sure to take the long way around the desks before dropping the envelope at her workspace. She wasn't there. Her monitor was still on, paused on some Slack conversation with a person whose profile photo was a dog in sunglasses. I didn't read it. Didn't care. I just laid the folder across her keyboard, face up, with the words, "You should read this before your flight," written in Sharpie across the front. I didn't stop to talk. Didn't flinch when her coworker, that skinny guy with the too tight vest who always gave me weird energy, asked, "Hey, can I help you?" I didn't even blink. Back in my car, I parked around the corner and watched from a distance. I saw her return. I saw her open it. And I saw her freeze. At first, she didn't move. Just sat there, staring at the papers like they might explode. Then her hand reached for her phone. She made a call. I knew it was to Mason. She held the phone to her ear for a long time, but from where I sat, I could tell it wasn't ringing. That's when it hit her. He wasn't picking up. Not because he was scared, because he was gone. You see, what I didn't tell you is that I sent Camden a copy too. And Camden, bless him, was a hell of a lot angrier than I was. Turns out, Bryn didn't just circle back to him for fun. She had borrowed money. A lot. Promised she'd pay it back with startup equity from a tech deal Mason was building behind closed doors. A lie, obviously. And Camden? He wasn't in the mood to wait quietly. He didn't just threaten Mason. He exposed him. That morning, while I was printing my files, Camden leaked every internal chat Mason ever sent on his work laptop, including the parts where he mocked the compliance team, bragged about leveraging dumb husband access, and even joked about Bryn's wedding ring being just a prop. And now Mason? Mason was missing. Vanished. Bryn didn't know that yet. But I did. That afternoon, I walked into the compliance meeting and handed over the truth, not as a victim, but as a witness. I laid it out like a prosecutor. I showed timelines. I played audio clips from the flash drive Delilah had given me. I handed over the document showing a fake resignation email scheduled to send from my laptop the morning after their Lisbon flight. They didn't say much at first, but they listened. And when the legal officer finally looked up at me and said, "We believe you," I felt something inside me uncoil. Just a little. By the time I left the building, Bryn had called me 7 times, texted 16, left voicemails that swung between crying, accusing, bargaining, and finally, silence. And that night, at 8:43 p.m., she sent one final message. "Please, just talk to me. Mason's gone. I don't know where he is. I'm scared." I read it, and I didn't reply. I had bigger things to do. Because her panic? That was only the beginning. The text Bryn sent about Mason being gone wasn't a lie. He'd vanished. Wiped. Ghosted. But not in the dramatic, cloak-and-dagger kind of way. Mason wasn't clever enough for that. He was sloppy. Arrogant. The kind of man who thought using incognito mode made him a criminal mastermind. I knew he wouldn't disappear far. Guys like him don't vanish. They hide nearby and hope their mistakes blow over. I didn't go home that night. I didn't even change clothes. I sat in my car with my laptop open, using every tool I had access to, and some I technically didn't, to trace him. I remembered a throwaway detail Camden had shared during our meeting at the coffee shop. He said Mason once mentioned a safe place he liked to go when he needed to clear his head. Cheap coffee, cable TV, and no nosy front desk. That rang a bell. There's only one place like that around here, the Riverbend Motel. An hour outside town, just off a highway nobody brags about. A place where the curtains never get washed and the vending machines eat your change. If someone like Mason were scared and stupid, he'd think a place like that could keep him invisible. I got there just after 10 p.m. The parking lot was nearly empty except for a rusted Corolla and a pickup with a shattered rear view. I walked into the lobby pretending to be casual, pretending I wasn't about to confront the man who tried to bury me with a fake confession and sleep in my bed like he earned it. The woman behind the front desk had a smoker's voice and a cigarette in her left hand, even though a sign above her head said "No smoking." She barely looked up when I approached. "I'm looking for my brother," I said, trying not to sound too rehearsed. "He checked in yesterday. I think he might be in some kind of trouble." She blew a stream of smoke to the side and squinted at her logbook. "Name? Mason Fitzroy." She flipped a page, jabbed her nail at a line. "Room 16. I thanked her and walked the outside corridor, each step a drumbeat in my chest. I didn't have a plan. Not really. I had adrenaline and a car key between my fingers just in case he got stupid. Room 16 looked like it hadn't been cleaned in a decade. The blinds were drawn. The hallway light buzzed overhead. I knocked once, sharp and loud. No answer. Then I knocked again, and this time, the door cracked open. He hadn't even locked it. Mason stood there barefoot, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt that looked like it had been slept in for 2 days. His face was pale, unshaven, his eyes darting like a rabbit's. When he saw me, he didn't flinch. He froze. "Lyle," he said, his voice thin. "I can explain." That's when I laughed. Really laughed. Because the absurdity of it all hit me. After everything, after the lies and the theft, and the way he tried to erase me from my own life, he still thought, "I can explain," was a reasonable place to start. "No," I said. "You can listen." I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room stank of instant noodles and fear. There were papers scattered on the nightstand, maps, boarding passes, receipts. Mason backed up like I was going to hit him, which almost insulted me. I've never hit anyone in my life. I don't even know how to throw a punch properly. But in that moment, I understood the appeal. "You left her," I said. "You let her panic while you hid out here watching TV and eating crackers like a fugitive. You think this is going away." "She told me she was handling it," he mumbled. "Said you were emotional. That you'd get over it." My blood went cold. She said I'd get over being framed for a federal crime? He swallowed hard. I didn't know how deep it went. I didn't read all the documents. She said it was just misdirection. That was the word. Misdirection. Like our marriage was a magic trick. I walked to the window and opened the curtain. A blinking vacancy sign stared back at us. You know what the company's doing, right? They've launched an investigation. They're involving authorities. You're done, Mason. Whatever you thought this was, it's over. I can give them everything, he said quickly, like he was negotiating. Emails, phone calls. I saved stuff. I even recorded one of our conversations when she started talking about insurance policies. She wanted me to take one out on you. That stopped me. What? She said you were struggling. That if something happened, we'd be protected. I thought she was just being dramatic. He laughed nervously, rubbed his jaw. But then I saw her search history. How to edit digital evidence. Legal liability of digital signatures. Stuff like that. That's when I bolted. I stared at him. This wasn't cheating anymore. It wasn't even fraud. It was madness. She'd planned for every angle. And I hadn't just been a patsy. I'd been a backup plan. I pulled out my phone and pressed record. Mason, I said, keeping my voice level. I want you to say exactly what you just told me. Word for word. To my surprise, he didn't argue. He looked tired, defeated, like a man who finally realized his parachute was filled with rocks. He recited everything. Every detail. Names. Dates. The login credentials Bryn stole. The draft she showed him. The payout they were aiming for after Lisbon. When he finished, I stopped recording and stood up. I don't care what happens to you, I said, sliding my phone back into my pocket. But you're going to help make this right. He nodded slowly, lips trembling. I don't have a choice. I walked out of that room not feeling triumphant, not even relieved. I felt hollow. But inside that hollow space, something new was growing. Clarity. In the next part, I'll tell you how Bryn finally cornered me, and what she tried to offer when she realized her empire had cracked. She showed up at my doorstep exactly 2 days later. I wasn't surprised. I'd been expecting her, just not at that exact hour. The sun was low, casting long amber streaks through the living room window. I was sitting at the kitchen table again, the same spot where I'd opened the folder. This time, though, I had Benny curled up at my feet, the blinds wide open, and a warm cup of tea instead of cold dread. Bryn stood there, outside the front door, in a beige coat she used to save for job interviews. Her eyes were swollen like she hadn't slept, or hadn't stopped crying. Her hair was tied back. No makeup, just the raw, unvarnished version of herself that she rarely let anyone see, let alone me. I opened the door calm, quiet, balanced in a way I hadn't been in weeks. Lyle, she started, but I held up a hand. Don't. Just tell me what you came here to say. She hesitated, then stepped back and pulled a manila envelope from her bag. I came to return everything. The money, the accounts, the shares Mason helped set up. It's all here. And I signed a statement. She extended the envelope, fingers trembling. It clears you of everything. Every login, every transfer. I gave it to your company's legal team this morning. I took the envelope but didn't open it. Why now? I asked. Because I was wrong. And not just about this, about everything, she said. You were never boring. You were stable. Safe. Good. I convinced myself I needed something bigger, wilder, but all I really did was torch the only good thing I had. She looked down. I know you'll never take me back. I don't expect that. But I couldn't leave without making sure you knew the truth came from me. Not lawyers. Not press releases. Me. There was a long silence. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just looked at her. This woman I had once built a future with, and felt something I hadn't in a long time. Closure. Thank you, I said simply. You're right. I can't take you back. But I appreciate that you showed up. You didn't have to, but you did. She nodded, slowly. Are you going to press charges? I don't need revenge, I said. I've already got something better. That caught her off guard. She tilted her head. What's that? I stepped aside and let her see the living room. Boxes. Half-packed. Open laptop on the coffee table with a folder titled New Start, Seattle. I got offered a new position. Full-time. Bigger company. Different state. Fresh slate. They saw what I went through and said they wanted someone who knew how to fight with grace. Bryn swallowed hard. You're leaving? I'm going, Bryn. There's a difference. She blinked fast, nodded again, then stepped back from the door. I closed it gently. That night, I didn't lie awake. I didn't scroll through old texts. I didn't replay conversations or wonder what I could have done differently. Instead, I slept. Deeply. Peacefully. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't living in a story written by someone else. I was writing my own. And I was finally free.